All right, my first guess says President Biden is acting like an irresponsible person who just got their first credit card. But the charges that the president is racking up are in the trillions. And the ones who will be paying for it will be the American public, now and future generations to come. He and his team are on the road this week trying to sell his infrastructure plan and welfare bills that will cost taxpayers over $4 trillion. All of this being spent, by the way, in the name of jobs. I go back to last week when he spoke to Congress. Here's what he had to say. Everything is about jobs.
And the process will create thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs. The American Jobs Plan will help millions of people get back to their jobs and back to their careers. The American Jobs Plan is going to create millions of good-paying jobs, jobs Americans can raise a family on. And it raises revenue to pay for the plans I propose and will create millions of jobs that will grow the economy. What I'm proposing will help create millions of jobs and generate historic economic growth. The consensus is if we act to save the planet, we can create millions of jobs.
By my count, we'll now have more jobs than American people, but based upon the price tag, we'll all need 2 or 3 jobs just to pay for it. Joining us now to talk more about this, Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry represents the 10th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. He is also a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tony, great to see you. And as you can see, we're actually driving on one of the great Pennsylvania roads that could use some attention from an infrastructure plan. But instead, we're going to spend, $400 billion on elder care. Now, that might be an issue that we need to talk about, but it's not infrastructure. And it neither is the billions of dollars that we're going to be spending on green children's lunches in school and the $10 billion spent to create a civilian climate corps and numerous other things. Tony, as you probably know, only about 9% of this infrastructure bill actually goes to what people believe and feel is actual infrastructure, right? Like the highways, the bridges, airports, ports of entry, and water, sewer, gas, those type of things. About 9 to 10%. That's it. The rest of the $1 trillion is spent towards other kind of jobs that have absolutely nothing to do with infrastructure. But of course, the Biden administration knows that people support infrastructure. So they're going to call all the social spending and all the socialist spending infrastructure, hoping that people won't have a clue what they're actually spending their money on.
Right. And it's all done in the names of jobs. It's going to create millions and millions of jobs, according to the president, as he said last week in his address to the joint session of Congress, in which there was only about 200 people there. The reality is this is going to tax the American people. How are we going to pay for $4.1 trillion in new government programs?
Tony, I have no idea. The Biden administration has said that they don't want a deficit spend, which means that they're going to have to tax their way to $2.3 trillion in infrastructure. But you have to add the other things, the Green New Deal, et cetera, that President Biden spoke about in his address to Congress. I think it's somewhere over $6 trillion, of which there is no plan. We even if you taxed everybody's income and taxed every single bit of it, it wouldn't amount to that much. So it's going to be a combination of taxing everybody and printing the money. And of course, Tony, every time they print a dollar that's not backed up by anything, it makes the dollar that you have in your pocket worth a little less than $1. And in this case, when we're printing trillions of dollars, that's lost value that American citizens that are hardworking, paying their taxes, have to spend on their own lives. But President Biden, as a progressive, and I don't know how you call this progress, but as a socialist, essentially, doesn't seem to care about that whatsoever.
Well, Congressman Perry, when the president rolled this out a couple of weeks ago, you at that time said you didn't see any bipartisan support for that. Today, the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, said no Republican will be voting for this. They have offered a compromise plan of $600 billion worth of infrastructure spending that trims all of the non-infrastructure spending that is in this bill. That's still a pretty hefty price tag. Do you see the Democrats actually and the president working in a bipartisan way to arrive at a infrastructure bill?
Well, what I see the president doing is actually speaking like he's going to be working towards a bipartisan solution. But based on the past 100 days, where he talked about unifying the country, and then went on a totally partisan binge of executive orders and legislative agenda items, I think it's just rhetoric, Tony. I don't think they have any interest in whatsoever other than the optics of working in a bipartisan fashion. I suspect that AOC and her acolytes will determine that the Senate proposal is dead on arrival. They must have the Green New Deal and components of that in any infrastructure bill. They won't support it, and they'll kill it in the House. And so I really don't see anything more than rhetoric from the Biden administration regarding bipartisan participation.
It's interesting you mentioned AOC. She has been singing the praises of the Biden administration, saying that as progressive, they're very, very happy with what they see out of the first 100 days of the Biden administration. And I certainly would think that she's happy with this quote unquote infrastructure bill because this thing's pretty green.
It is, but Tony, they do have the Green New Deal teed up right behind it. And so that's because this infrastructure package that President Biden offered isn't nearly green enough for AOC. And so the progressive agenda is actually progress towards socialism. It is not about free markets. It's not about our freedoms, and it's not about fiscal responsibility for sure. And it's barely about infrastructure at all. And you don't have to do anything except just read the details to know that, regardless of what President Biden or what AOC has to say. The truth is in what they do.
Now, you mentioned, Congressman Perry, this being over $6 trillion that the administration is spending. When you look at their coronavirus relief, you look at this jobs plan, you look at the quote-unquote American Family Plan, universal child care, and community college free, quote-unquote, those are scare hashtag, free.
Right.
What do you get for free? This is pumping a tremendous amount of money into the economy that was pretty hot and was moving quite well under the tax cuts of the Trump administration. Even some of Biden's own people are saying, well, we might have some inflation. I mean, we're setting the stage for some rapid inflation, and this is going to hurt the very people they say they are championing.
You're absolutely right, Tony. And what concerns me is it might be inflation on an unprecedented scale based on the unprecedented scale of the printing of money that we've seen from the administration. And while the stock market might be up, you must realize that it's inflated because there's really nowhere else to put your money. You can't get any return on investment at the bank. And so everybody's pumping money into the stock market or the housing market. But when that bubble bursts, I will tell you what, Tony, it's not going to be like pumping the brakes. It's going to be like slamming the brakes on this economy. And I don't think that most Americans are really ready to see what's going to happen. And they're being told there's no inflation right now, but all they have to do is go to their gas pump and put some gas in the car, and they can see what's happened over the course of the last 100 days. And my goodness, if you go to buy some lumber, you can find out that a 2x4 is going to cost you $8, or a sheet of plywood is going to cost you $100. That's due to the inflation that they're saying is not occurring.
Yeah, I want to play another very quick clip of Joe Biden talking about this. Play clip number 2.
In your first 100 days, you've proposed $6 trillion in new spending, and you plan to pay for it by raising taxes on people, on businesses, on investments. Why tax and spend so much when the economy is still recovering as a result of the pandemic?
That's the reason why it's recovering, because we're investing. Look how rapidly it's recovered since we passed the last piece of legislation. And that legislation was $1.9 trillion. If we don't invest in this country, we're going to fall behind even further.
Scott Perry, we're up against a break, but the reason it's recovering is because of what the previous administration did in cutting regulation and taxes.
You're absolutely right, Tony. And the other cold water that this administration keeps throwing on it and the left keeps throwing on it, is paying people not to work. And I can't tell you in Pennsylvania how many times I've been to a business who was desperate for employees.
Right.
There's help wanted signs everywhere around Pennsylvania, and we are paying people to not go to work.
Yeah.
And that's really having a chilling effect as well. It's just more of the same from these hardcore leftists. Don't be fooled by any of this.
All right, Congressman Scott Perry, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tony. Have a great day. God bless you.